My name is Rachel Bennett, and I'm 30 years old. I never thought the deepest betrayal of my life would come from the one person I used to adore most, my older sister, Vanessa. It started with a phone call at 2:42 a.m. on a Tuesday. You know how they say nothing good ever comes after midnight? They're right. I jolted awake, heart hammering, and when I saw Officer Morales on the caller ID, my stomach dropped before I even answered. "There's been an accident," the voice said gently. "Your parents' vehicle was hit by a drunk driver. I'm so sorry, Miss Bennett. There were no survivors." No survivors. The words blurred. I dropped the phone. My parents, Daniel and Margaret Bennett, had just celebrated their 38th wedding anniversary at their favorite seafood restaurant. They were supposed to be home by 9. They were supposed to be safe. I didn't just lose two people. I lost my roots, my compass, my home. After I called Vanessa my older sister by 4 years, she wailed so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. But before we even hung up, her questions started. Did they have a will? Who's handling the insurance? Do you think they left the lake house to me? I blinked through my tears, stunned. Our parents weren't even identified yet, and she was already talking about the property, the money. I tried to brush it off. Grief makes people act strange. But deep down I knew this was no fluke. This was Vanessa raw and unmasked. Let me take you back for a moment. Growing up in the quiet suburb of Willow Falls, Vanessa and I were inseparable. We built blanket forts, created imaginary worlds, and swore we'd be best friends forever. She'd hold my hand crossing the street, taught me how to tie my shoes, shared her Halloween candy, well, the stuff she didn't like, but still, she was my hero. Our parents weren't rich. Dad owned a modest lumber yard, and Mom kept the books while still somehow making every school recital and dentist appointment. We lived on love, not luxury, but that was enough for me. For Vanessa, it never was. She started changing around middle school. Suddenly, it was all about who had designer sneakers, whose parents drove the newest SUVs. She hated our thrift store jackets, sneered at my birthday parties in the backyard. Why can't we be normal, she'd snap. By high school, she had mastered emotional warfare, crying to get her way, guilt-tripping, dramatic silences. Our parents gave in more and more each year. I stayed quiet, stayed grateful, played the good daughter. Vanessa went off to a private university out of state. I stayed local, earned a scholarship to study elementary education. She called home often, not to check in, but to request money for books, fees, emergencies. Our parents always paid. Then came Ethan, her husband, a flashy financial advisor who treated every conversation like a sales pitch. Together they were all image-curated vacations, leased luxury cars, Instagram-perfect parties. Their wedding, over $80,000. Guess who footed the bill? And yet Vanessa always insisted she was barely making ends meet. I, on the other hand, rented a one-bedroom apartment with a wobbly ceiling fan and a couch I found on Facebook Marketplace. My joy came from my third graders and my garden, and my parents. God, they were so proud of my simplicity. Dad would often say, "Rachel, you figured out what actually matters." That sentence echoes in my bones now. 2 weeks before the accident, I sat with Dad on their porch. Mom had just pulled an apple pie from the oven. I was trimming his roses when he said, "We've made some changes, like to protect the future." I didn't understand then, but I would. 3 days after the crash, I took on the burden of funeral arrangements. Vanessa claimed she was too shattered to handle logistics, but she had energy to call banks, insurance companies, even the estate attorney. "We need to be practical," she said. "There's a lot at stake." I wanted to scream, "Our parents are dead," but I didn't. The funeral was set for Saturday, a closed casket just like they'd wanted. I arrived early, wanting a moment alone. I touched the wood, whispered all the thank yous I never said enough. Then I saw her. Vanessa swept into the church like it was a fashion gala. Black silk dress, diamond studs, even her children were styled like miniature royals. She wept loudly, posed for pictures, hugged distant relatives with dramatic flair. I stood there watching my grief curdling into something sour. After the service, as mourners trickled into the basement for the reception, she pulled me aside. "Rachel, we need to talk privately." She led me into a side room and shut the door, then pulled out a folded legal document from her purse. "I want you to sign this," she said smoothly. "It's just a formality. You'll keep any sentimental items you want. But the estate, the house, the savings that should come to me, you don't need it." My jaw dropped. "You're serious?" "I have 2 kids, a mortgage, business investments. You, live in a rental, and teach kids ABCs. You're not exactly planning a future here." I stared at her, stunned. The woman in front of me was no longer my sister. She was a stranger. And I realized with an ache that went down to my spine that the real storm hadn't even begun yet. And trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how I handled what came next. 3 days after the funeral, I found myself sitting in the mahogany-paneled office of Mr. Gerald Whitaker, the family's estate attorney, for as long as I could remember. His building smelled like polished wood and old money, a strange comfort in the chaos of recent days. I arrived 10 minutes early, clutching a notebook like it was body armor. I didn't know what to expect, but my instincts told me Vanessa wasn't going to like it. Right on cue, she and Ethan walked in exactly at 2 p.m., dressed like they were attending a corporate board meeting. Vanessa didn't greet me. She just gave a cool nod and sat across the table. Ethan gave me a tight-lipped smile, the kind that hides a dozen unspoken insults. Mr. Whitaker adjusted his reading glasses and cleared his throat. "We are here today to formally execute the last will and testament of Daniel Charles Bennett and Margaret Elaine Bennett. This will was updated 6 months prior to their passing and is fully compliant with all legal requirements. All decisions herein were made with clear intent and sound mind." Vanessa shifted in her seat, a small smirk tugging at her lips. I could feel her confidence. She expected the world, and she was certain it was about to be handed to her on a silver platter. "Before I begin," Mr. Whitaker continued, "I'd like to note that your parents appointed an executor to oversee the implementation of their wishes. That executor is Rachel Bennett." The smirk on Vanessa's face froze. I watched her eyes twitch just a little, but I saw it. "Me?" I asked quietly. Mr. Whitaker nodded. "Yes, you have full authority to administer their estate." Vanessa leaned forward, voice thinly veiled with sarcasm. "Surely that's just a symbolic title, right?" "I assure you," he replied, "it's anything but symbolic." He continued reading. "The Bennett family home, located at 78 Oakview Lane, shall be placed in a family trust. Rachel Bennett will have the right to reside there indefinitely, or administer it as a rental property, with proceeds divided according to the terms of the trust. The house, the home we were raised in." Vanessa's knuckles turned white on the arm of her chair. Next came the business. The family lumberyard Bennett Timber and Supply, valued at $1.7 million, is to remain in the family trust, with Rachel designated as trustee, responsible for overseeing its management or sale. I glanced at Vanessa. Her lips were parted in disbelief. Then came the clincher. "The remaining liquid assets, including savings investments and insurance policies, total approximately $910,000. Mr. Whitaker paused for effect. "After thorough review, your parents documented that Vanessa Bennett Hastings received $334,250 in financial assistance over the past 13 years. These were explicitly categorized as advances against inheritance. Each instance is accompanied by signed documentation acknowledging this designation." He slid a folder across the table. Vanessa snatched it up, scanning quickly. Her hands began to tremble. "This is a mistake," she hissed. "They gave me that money. They never asked for it back." "They didn't need to," Mr. Whitaker said gently. "That's the purpose of an inheritance advance. They wanted to support you while they were alive, but also maintain fairness upon their passing." Ethan leaned in. "We were under the impression the estate would be divided equally. It is. After reconciling the advances, the remaining assets are split 60% to Rachel and 40% to Vanessa, with conditions." "Conditions?" Vanessa snapped. "Yes," Mr. Whitaker said, sliding another document forward. "Your portion will be distributed in equal installments over 10 years, contingent on 2 requirements: 1, completion of a certified financial literacy program, and 2, the establishment of college savings accounts for both your children." Vanessa's jaw fell open. That's manipulation. That's not fair." Ethan stood abruptly. "We made financial plans based on a very different expectation. This isn't acceptable." "It was your choice to plan around an inheritance you didn't yet have," Mr. Whitaker replied evenly. "I bet this was your doing." Vanessa spat at me, face twisted with rage. "You poisoned them against me." "I didn't even know they'd updated the will," I said truthfully. "I found out with you. You always played the victim, always made yourself look better." Mr. Whitaker gently raised a hand. "If I may, there's one more item. A letter from your parents addressed to both of you, intended to be read aloud at this moment." He unfolded the pages and began to read. My father's voice echoed in Mr. Whitaker's cadence filled the room. "To our daughters, if this letter is being read, we are no longer with you, and we're so deeply sorry for the pain that brings. Vanessa, Our love for you has never wavered, but we know we enabled patterns that hurt you in the long run. We hoped that providing would bring you happiness, but we now see that accountability and limits are more loving than unchecked generosity. Rachel, your independence, humility, and quiet strength have been our greatest pride. You've never asked for more than what you had, and you've always given more than expected. We hope this will offers both of you not just resources, but a path forward. Our dream is not to divide you, but to bring healing through truth. With all our love, Mom and Dad. When the letter ended, Vanessa didn't speak. She simply stood, gathered her things, and walked out of the office without a single glance in my direction. The storm had started, but this was just the first crack of thunder, and I had no idea how far she'd go to reclaim what she thought was hers. By the time I got home from the attorney's office, my phone was blowing up. Missed calls, text messages, voicemails all from Vanessa. The first one was just her crying. The second, accusations. You manipulated them. You always hated that I was the favorite, admit it. You knew exactly what you were doing. The third one was quieter, more dangerous. I'm giving you 48 hours to fix this, Rachel. If not, I'll take legal action. And believe me, I have the resources. I stared at the screen, stunned. She was really doing this. She was going to fight the will. As executor, I had to notify Mr. Whitaker immediately. By morning, his response arrived in my inbox. Rachel, if Vanessa proceeds with a will contest, it will activate the no contest clause. That means if her claim fails in court, she forfeits everything, even the conditional trust payments. Your parents were aware of the potential consequences. They asked me to include video and written documentation to protect the integrity of their wishes. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I didn't want any of this. I didn't want to fight my sister in court. I wanted my parents back. I wanted to grieve in peace. But Vanessa had turned this into a battlefield, and now there was no way to stay neutral. She'd declared war. The following days were a blur of shock and gossip. Word spread through our extended family quickly, and of course the version they heard was her version. She's saying you manipulated your way into everything, my cousin Lily whispered during a lunch break. That you isolated your parents in their final months and convinced them to disinherit her. What I nearly choked on my sandwich. She said you used your job as a teacher to play the martyr while she was supporting a family and managing investments. She said you had no expenses, no dependents, and no need for the money. My hands trembled under the table. That's a complete lie. I know, Lily looked at me with sympathy, but not everyone else does. Vanessa's lawyer filed the official challenge 3 days later. Claim undue influence. Argument parents were manipulated while mentally vulnerable. Goal: invalidate the will and redistribute the estate equally, no trust conditions. Mr. Whitaker calmly reassured me. Your parents anticipated this, he said over coffee. We have notarized statements, signed acknowledgement forms, financial records, and 2 separate video recordings. There's also a letter your father drafted in case of legal action. But Rachel, this will be emotionally brutal. I need to prepare you for that. I nodded, barely holding it together. I just don't understand why she's doing this. We were sisters. His voice softened. Entitlement is a dangerous thing. When someone believes they deserve everything, anything less feels like betrayal. The real twist came a week later when I found the folder. I had gone back to my parents' house to begin organizing documents, photographs, and estate paperwork. The house was still too still. Every corner whispered memories. I was in Dad's old office when I opened the bottom drawer of his desk. And there it was. A plain manila folder, no label, no drama. Inside, photocopies of credit card statements in my parents' names. Large charges to high-end department stores, spas, and designer boutiques. Purchases they never would have made. Dates that didn't line up with where I knew they were. A report from a private investigator. And then the final page, a letter from my dad to Vanessa. We have confirmed that you opened credit accounts in our names. This is identity theft. We are giving you one opportunity to explain yourself before we involve legal authorities. We have supported you for years. This betrayal of trust breaks our hearts. The letter was dated 2 weeks before their deaths. I sat there shaking cold all over. They knew. They knew what she'd done. They were preparing to confront her. That's why they updated the will. That's why they placed safeguards. It wasn't just about responsibility, it was about protection. And now, she was trying to erase that decision in court. I took the folder straight to Mr. Whitaker the next day. His normally calm expression faltered as he read the documents. This changes everything, he said quietly. So we can win, I asked. Yes, he said, but it'll destroy her. I nodded slowly. What if I don't want to destroy her? Then you have a choice. I stared at the folder, my hands curled around its edges like a shield. My parents had been firm, but loving. They had tried to teach us both. Even in death, they had left room for growth, if Vanessa could choose it. But if she couldn't, I would have to choose for her. And that terrified me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, replaying every memory of my sister I could summon, the good ones, the ones I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Vanessa reading me bedtime stories when I was too scared to sleep. Vanessa holding my hand during our first plane ride. Vanessa slipping her favorite bracelet into my suitcase before summer camp. There had been love there, real love, once. And now here we were, two grown women standing on opposite sides of a courtroom before a judge, because one of us couldn't let go of entitlement. And the other couldn't let go of her parents' final wishes. I wasn't sure which of us was more broken. So the next morning I did something unexpected. I texted her, meet me. No lawyers, no yelling, just us. Coffee at 3 p.m. at Marlowe's. To my surprise, she agreed. Marlowe's Cafe sat on the edge of Willow Falls's historic district, worn leather chairs, chipped mugs, the smell of cinnamon rolls, and oversteeped tea. We'd gone there 100 times growing up. Vanessa once wrote a poem about their hot chocolate in middle school. She walked in 5 minutes late, sunglasses on, hair in a sleek, low bun, but not her usual polished self. Her nails were chipped, her designer bag was scuffed. She looked tired, like a person carrying too many versions of herself at once. We sat down in silence. She ordered a black coffee. I got chamomile tea, a habit I picked up after Mom passed. Then I pulled out a single sheet of paper, not the folder, not the credit card statements, not the investigator's report, just Dad's letter. I placed it on the table between us. Vanessa stared at it like it might bite her. I found this in his desk, I said quietly. They knew about the credit card's nests. They were going to confront you. That's why they updated the will. Her face lost all color. You read it? She asked barely above a whisper. I nodded. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her shoulders slumped. I was drowning, she finally whispered. Gregory made some bad investments. We were behind on the mortgage. He said we'd recover if we could just hold out a little longer. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told them the truth. They were already pulling away, she said. They stopped saying yes to every request. They started asking questions. That terrified me. There it was. The truth, raw and sad. She wasn't evil. She was desperate and too proud to admit she was scared. I don't want to go to court, I said. But if you continue this lawsuit, I'll have no choice. That folder will become public record. Her eyes welled with tears. I don't know what else to do, she said. Gregory's threatening to leave. He says I've failed our family. He's already pulled money from our joint accounts. We have nothing left. You have 2 children who need stability, I said. You have a family name that doesn't have to be ruined. You can still choose something different, Ness. But you have to walk away from the contest. You have to let the trust stand. She looked down at her coffee hands, shaking. I'm so tired of pretending everything's fine, she said. Then stop pretending. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, she said, what happens if I drop the lawsuit? I'll honor the terms of the trust, I replied. Nothing more, nothing less. You'll get your yearly disbursements, you'll take the financial literacy course, and the kids will have their college accounts set up. I'll help you work with Mr. Whitaker's office to make it as easy as possible. But if you try to fight this again, I'll use everything I have. Vanessa nodded slowly. I need time to think. Take it, I said. But know this, I'm not doing this out of revenge. I'm doing it because this is what Mom and Dad wanted. They weren't punishing you. They were trying to help you. One last time. She didn't respond, just sat there staring at the letter, silent tears falling down her cheeks. That night I went home and reread Mom's last note to me, the one Mr. Whitaker had given me after the funeral. Kindness isn't always softness, Rachel. Sometimes it's the strength to draw a boundary. Sometimes it's offering someone the dignity of starting over even if they don't know they need it yet. I didn't know if Vanessa would take the olive branch, but I knew this, I had offered it with love. And if she rejected it, I was ready to fight. Not out of hate, out of honor, out of grief, and maybe out of hope. 2 weeks later, the courthouse loomed before me, tall, gray, unfeeling. I stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps, clutching a folder filled with everything's signatures, financial records, the private investigator's report, and the letter from Dad. My hands trembled slightly, though I tried to steady them. Vanessa had made her decision. She was going through with the lawsuit. I shouldn't have been surprised, but a small foolish part of me had hoped that the conversation at Marlowe's might have been enough. It wasn't. She filed through her lawyer claiming undue influence, mental vulnerability, coercion. They were throwing every argument at the wall, hoping something would stick. I met Mr. Whitaker on the courthouse steps. His presence was like a weighted blanket, calm, steady, professional. "You ready?" he asked gently. "No," I whispered, "but I'm here." The courtroom was packed tighter than I expected. Extended family, a few curious townspeople, even some of my mom's former book club friends. The fallout from this case was already rippling through our small town. Vanessa sat across from me, flanked by her high-powered attorney, a woman with sharp cheekbones and sharper rhetoric. Vanessa's expression was one I knew well, a mask of polished grief. She wore a simple black dress, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. Everything about her screamed respectable daughter. It was all calculated, all for show. But I knew better, and so did Mr. Whitaker. He began our side with a quiet strength, presenting the facts one by one. No drama, just documentation. Signed and dated forms acknowledging Vanessa's financial advances over 13 years. Video footage of our parents, clear-headed, articulate, explaining their decisions. Testimonies from their family physician attesting to their excellent mental health at the time of the will update. When he submitted the private investigator's report, there was a collective gasp in the courtroom. Vanessa's attorney objected. "Your Honor, this is prejudicial and irrelevant to the question of undue influence." The judge, a silver-haired woman named Judge Arlene Blackwell, raised an eyebrow. "It goes to character and motivation," Mr. Whitaker countered. "If one party was engaging in financial fraud, that speaks directly to the credibility of their claims." Judge Blackwell allowed it. The moment Vanessa saw the documents, the credit card statements, the investigative notes, the photos of purchases made in our parents' names, her face crumpled. Gregory, who had sat smugly by her side up until then, began whispering furiously in her ear. His eyes kept darting to the exit. It was falling apart. Vanessa tried to speak up. She denied the fraud, called the purchases accidental or authorized, claimed she was confused, misunderstood. But the signatures were there. Her handwriting, her guilt. Then came the kicker, Dad's letter dated just 2 weeks before the accident. It laid everything bare, not just the betrayal, but their intent to act on it. I didn't want to use it, I truly didn't. But I had no choice. When the judge asked if Vanessa had anything to say in response, she just sat there, silent, frozen tears streaming down her face. The room was heavy with disappointment. It wasn't just the legal facts. It was the emotional reality setting in. Vanessa hadn't just hurt our parents financially. She had broken their trust. After a short recess, Judge Blackwell returned with her decision. "I have reviewed the evidence thoroughly. There is no indication of undue influence. On the contrary, the deceased took deliberate, well-documented steps to ensure fairness while maintaining boundaries for the financial health of their family. The will stands." She paused and her eyes landed on Vanessa. "Furthermore, due to the inclusion of a no-contest clause, this legal challenge has activated the forfeiture provision. Mrs. Hastings will receive only those personal items explicitly designated to her in the will. All other claims to the estate are void." A ripple of shocked murmurs moved through the courtroom. Vanessa gasped. Gregory stood abruptly and walked out without looking back. She tried to speak, to plead, but the judge's gavel came down. "Court is adjourned." I didn't feel victorious as I walked out of that courtroom. I felt hollow. Vanessa sat slumped on the bench alone. Her makeup smeared her hands, shaking. She looked at me, eyes wide and broken. "He left," she whispered. "Gregory." She nodded. "He cleared out our bank account, said there was no point in staying married to a financial burden. I have nothing, Rachel. No house, no savings, no backup plan." I sat next to her slowly, not touching, just present. "You still have your kids," I said gently. She looked at me, eyes flooded with pain. "I don't know how to tell them we've lost everything." "You tell them the truth," I said, "and you start over, from where you are." It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something. That night I went home and cried for hours. Not just for my parents. Not just for the court battle. But for my sister, the person she became, and the future I wasn't sure we could rebuild. And yet, Mom's words came back to me. "Kindness isn't weakness, Rachel. It's courage. And sometimes the first act of love is saying no." Maybe this was the start of something real. Or maybe it was just the end. Either way, I was no longer afraid. 3 days after the court ruling, I returned home from school to find a small envelope waiting on my doormat. No postage, no return address. Just my name Rachel in soft looping handwriting I hadn't seen in months. It was Vanessa's. For a moment I didn't move. I just stood there in the hallway, heart-pounding, fingers trembling. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Another part, the tired, hopeful part, whispered, "Read it." I sat down on the couch, opened the envelope, and pulled out a handwritten letter. Rachel, there are no words big enough for what I owe you and what I've done to you. I've read and rewritten this letter more times than I can count, trying to find a version of myself that you might still believe in. But the truth is, I don't recognize the woman I became. I think somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing her, too. The court was the end of a long spiral I'd been in denial about for years. I didn't lose the inheritance. I lost my marriage. I lost the illusion of control. I lost the lies I used to survive. But what I can't lose, what I won't lose, is the chance to become someone better. Not for Gregory, not even for our parents, but for Emma and Jackson. They deserve a mother who doesn't measure love by dollar signs. They deserve someone who models integrity instead of image. That's why I've started therapy. I'm applying for jobs. I even enrolled in a community college accounting course this fall. Funny, right? After all the spending, I'm learning how money actually works. You didn't have to be kind to me, but you were. You could have exposed everything and humiliated me, but you didn't. Instead, you honored our parents' wishes and gave me one last chance to become worthy of their legacy. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just hope someday we can sit in the same room again without pain between us. Emma asks about you. Jackson still talks about the birdhouse you built with him that summer. They miss you. Whenever, if ever you're ready, I'd love to see you again. With regret for the past, and hope for something better. Vanessa. I read the letter twice, then a third time. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I ran my fingers over the paper as if touching her handwriting could give me the answer I needed. It didn't. But it gave me something else. A pause. A breath. A crack in the wall I'd built to survive her betrayal. That weekend, I drove to my parents' house, my house now, though it still didn't feel real. The garden out back had been a mess, so I pulled on gloves and started clearing out old leaves, trimming dead vines, pruning rose bushes that hadn't bloomed since Mom's last summer. Hours passed. The rhythm of the work soothed something restless in me. As I dug my fingers into the soil, I thought about roots, about growth, about the things we bury and the things we resurrect. And I thought about legacy. The next day, I met with Mr. Whitaker. I told him I wanted to exercise the discretionary clause in the trust, the one Mom and Dad left, just for me, the one that allowed the executor to make changes if dramatic circumstances occurred. I'd like to set up full college funds for Emma and Jackson, I said. Money they can't access until they graduate high school. Their parents can't touch it. It's solely for education. I want them to know their grandparents believed in them. He nodded. That's a beautiful idea. And I want to create a matching fund for Vanessa, I added. One that contributes $1 for every dollar she earns up to a modest limit. No access to lump sums, but if she works, she receives support. Mr. Whitaker raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? I hesitated only for a second. Yes, this isn't about rewarding the past. It's about offering a new path, if she chooses to walk it. The following week, I sent Vanessa a single envelope. Inside, the documents outlining her new earning-based trust, a letter explaining the college accounts for her children, and a small hand-drawn card from Jackson, a picture of a house with flowers and the words, "I love you, Aunt Rachel." She didn't respond right away, but she didn't fight it either. Weeks passed. Then one Saturday afternoon, I opened my front door to find Emma and Jackson on the porch holding a tray of brownies. Vanessa stood behind them. She didn't speak at first. But when she met my eyes, her voice cracked. Would it be okay if we came in? I stepped aside. Not as a full forgiveness. Not as a resolution. But as a beginning. 'Cause that's what healing is, isn't it? Not one giant leap of faith, but small steps. Slowly. Steadily. Together. Vanessa didn't move back into our lives overnight. She didn't become a different person in a week or even a month. But something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer pretending. And that in a family where image used to be everything was a miracle all its own. That first afternoon, she sat at the kitchen table in our parents' old house while the kids helped me bake. Vanessa looked like she didn't quite belong in her own skin, like she wasn't sure if she should be there or even wanted to be. But she stayed. She washed dishes. She laughed when Jackson got flour all over the dog. She didn't flinch when Emma called me Auntie Rach with unfiltered joy. Later, as the sun dipped below the trees, we sat on the porch, just the two of us. The same porch where Dad used to sip coffee, and Mom would clip her gardening gloves to the chair rail. Vanessa stared into the yard. I forgot how peaceful it is here, she said. You used to complain it was boring, I reminded her with a small smile. She chuckled. I used to think peace and boredom were the same thing. There was a long pause. I've started working, she said softly. Just part-time, front desk at a nonprofit. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I show up, I answer phones, I earn a paycheck. I nodded, letting her talk. She needed to say these things out loud, and I needed to hear them not because I didn't believe her, but because I wanted to believe she believed in herself. And I'm still in therapy, she added. Turns out the shopping addiction was more than just bad habits. It was anxiety, control issues, shame. I looked at her carefully. You don't owe me any explanations, I said, but I appreciate the honesty. She blinked, eyes damp. I used to think admitting I was wrong made me weak. It makes you real, I said. Another long silence, comfortable this time. Then thank you for setting up the kids' college accounts, she whispered. You didn't have to. I didn't do it for you, I replied gently. I did it for them. They deserve a clean start. She nodded. I know I lost the inheritance, but I don't want to lose my sister too. That hit something deep in me, deeper than I expected. I looked out at the yard. The trees were turning gold just like they had every fall of our childhood. You didn't lose me, I said. You pushed me away. There's a difference. And can I get that back? That depends, I said. You can't rebuild trust in a day. But if you keep showing up not as who you think you should be, but who you really are, we'll get somewhere. She wiped a tear from her cheek and nodded. I can do that. The next few months were quiet. Vanessa didn't push. She didn't ask for more than she was given. She kept her job, showed up to therapy, and even started attending free budgeting classes at the community college. Sometimes she dropped the kids off for baking nights or gardening Sundays. Sometimes she stayed. Sometimes she didn't. But there was always a thank you. Always an effort. That was new. And it mattered. Then one day out of nowhere, Emma asked if we could go visit Grandpa's lumber yard. I want to see where he worked, she said, where everything started. So we went. I unlocked the old office with the keys I hadn't touched in months. Dust floated in the light from the window. Dad's framed quote still hung above the desk. Build things that last, starting with yourself. Emma walked slowly through the aisles. Jackson peeked into the tool room. Vanessa stood in the doorway, hesitant. It's like time frozen here, she whispered. I nodded. Sometimes I come just to sit. She looked around and sighed. You know, I used to think this place was beneath me. And now, I think it's sacred. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about legacy, not in the money sense, not in the real estate or the insurance policies, but the real legacy character, resilience, generosity, accountability, the values our parents lived, the things they tried to teach us even after they were gone, and how somehow despite everything it was working, not perfectly, not painlessly, but piece by piece we were starting again. The next day I sat at the same kitchen table Mom once used to write grocery lists, and I drafted a proposal for something I'd been thinking about for months. The Bennett Legacy Fund, a scholarship foundation for first-generation college students in our town, in honor of Daniel and Margaret Bennett, funded by the trust, administered by me. It felt right. It felt like peace. And maybe, just maybe, it felt like forgiveness too. By spring, the garden behind our parents' house had bloomed into something beautiful, and for once so had we. Not the picture-perfect kind of bloom, not the glossy Instagram-filtered version of family, but the slow, stubborn growth that only comes after a brutal winter. And it all started with one question from Jackson. Aunt Rachel, are we still a family? I'd been trimming lavender near the porch. The air smelled like wet soil and sun-warmed wood. His words stopped me cold. I looked at his small, earnest face, the same brown eyes as Vanessa, the same sharp chin as our dad. And I said the truest thing I could. Yes, sweetheart, we are. A different kind of family, maybe, but still a family. He nodded slowly like he was deciding whether he believed me. Then he smiled and ran off to help Emma feed the neighbors' chickens. That evening, Vanessa came by after work, still in her office clothes. She was quieter these days, more grounded, less theatrical. I could tell the job was changing her. So was the therapy. She placed a small envelope on the kitchen counter. What's this? I asked. My 6-month evaluation from work, she said with a proud grin. They gave me a raise. A real one. And I used part of my bonus to make the first deposit into the kids' college accounts myself. I opened the envelope to see a printed receipt and a photo of the check. My eyes filled with tears. Not because of the money, but because she was finally stepping into the kind of responsibility our parents always hoped she'd embrace. Not because anyone forced her, but because she chose it. I'm proud of you, I said. She blinked quickly. I'm trying to be proud of me too. A few days later, I got a letter from the community college. My application to teach evening literacy classes had been accepted. I hadn't planned on going back to school in any way, but helping others rebuild had become a calling. Between that, the scholarship fund, and my regular classroom, I was busier than ever, but also more fulfilled than I'd felt in years. My world had shifted, and the grief. It was still there, but softer now, like a familiar ache instead of an open wound. I wore Mom's gardening gloves when I worked outside. Dad's old thermos came with me to school every morning. Their things had stopped haunting me. Now they grounded me. Their values lived on. That spring, we held a small backyard dinner to celebrate the first Bennett Legacy Scholarship recipients. 5 local high school seniors, all first-generation college students, came with their families. We grilled burgers, baked pies, and filled the garden with laughter again. Vanessa helped coordinate the decorations. Emma made handmade name cards. Jackson gave a short, shaky speech about how his grandparents loved people into better versions of themselves. It was the first time in over a year that I cried in front of Vanessa, not from pain, but from pride. After the event, as the sun sank low, Vanessa stood beside me by the garden gate. "Do you think they'd be proud of us?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "Honestly, I think they already were. They just didn't get to see this part." Vanessa nodded, wiping a tear with the back of her hand. "I still feel like I don't deserve any of this," she admitted. I turned to face her. "Then earn it, every day. Keep showing up, keep being honest. That's what makes you worthy." And she smiled, really smiled. Not for show. Not for performance. But because something inside her had finally begun to heal. Later that week, I got another letter, this time from our Aunt Margaret, Mom's oldest sister. She'd been silent during the entire legal battle, which had hurt more than I'd admitted. The letter was short, but it mattered. "Rachel, I didn't know what to say when all of this happened, but I've been watching from afar. You honored your parents in every way that counts, and you gave your sister the one thing none of us had the courage to give a second chance. That takes more strength than I think most people realize. They would be so proud of you. I know I am." I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. Sometimes the validation you need the most doesn't come from strangers or courts or bank accounts. It comes from the people who watched you grow and still believe in who you're becoming. That night, I stood on the porch under the stars, and for the first time since that terrible phone call at 2:42 a.m., I felt whole. Not because everything was fixed, but because something better had taken root. Something called forgiveness. And family. And faith. I thought the hardest parts were behind us. The court battle was over. The dust had settled. Vanessa was rebuilding. The kids were thriving. And I was learning how to live again in a world without Mom and Dad. But grief has a funny way of finding cracks in your peace, and sometimes so does the past. It started with a voicemail. "Ms. Bennett, this is Colleen Westbrook from First Federal Savings. I'm calling regarding a delinquent account under the name of Gregory Hastings that lists your parents as secondary guarantors. We'd appreciate a return call by the end of the week." My stomach twisted. Gregory. I hadn't heard his name in months, not since he vanished after the court ruling. Vanessa mentioned in passing that he'd moved states and started some crypto investment firm. But we hadn't spoken of him since. And now, he was dragging our parents' names into one last mess. I called the bank, explained that my parents had passed, that the estate had been settled, that any remaining accounts should have been closed. That's when they told me a business loan Gregory had co-signed with my father 2 years ago, when Dad still believed he was helping build something meaningful for his son-in-law, had gone into default. Gregory had failed to remove Dad's name from the paperwork, despite repeated reminders. And now that he'd declared personal bankruptcy, the bank was trying to collect from any associated parties. Technically, legally, ethically, they couldn't come after the estate. But that didn't stop the harassment letters, or the phone calls. It was like being haunted not by ghosts, but by poorly made choices with our last names still attached. I didn't tell Vanessa right away. I needed to gather the facts. Confirm there was nothing they could take. Protect what little peace we had left. But when I finally sat her down in the garden, she already knew something was wrong. "What is it?" she asked, setting down her tea. "You're doing the scrunchy eyebrow thing. That's never good." I let out a breath. "It's Gregory." Her face went blank. "Oh." I explained the loan, the calls, the letters, how it was all technically harmless but still unsettling, still painful. She closed her eyes. "I told him to remove Dad from that deal. I begged him. He said he did." "Well," I said gently, "he didn't." "I'm so sorry," she whispered, voice cracking. I brought him into our family. I vouched for him. I let him use Dad like a pawn." I put my hand on hers. "You also left him. You survived him. and you're raising your kids without him. That matters. She nodded slowly. But I still have to live with it, she said. Every time someone says his name, it feels like a bruise I forgot about. I understood that deeply. Because sometimes the things that wound us most aren't sharp. They're lingering, sticky, like shame, or guilt, or grief that hasn't found a place to land. A few days later, I took a walk through the lumber yard. The office still smelled faintly like cedar and motor oil. I sat at Dad's desk and opened one of the old filing cabinets. Tucked between an outdated vendor invoice and a catalog from 2002, I found a letter. Handwritten, dated about a year before the accident. Dear Gregory, when I co-signed that loan, I did it because I believed in second chances. Because I believed in you. But every promise you've made since has felt thinner. Every missed call, every unexplained expense, every time you assured us Vanessa was just stressed, it's starting to feel like a pattern. I know you want to be a provider. I know you want to build something your kids can be proud of. But son, let me say this clearly. You don't build legacy through shortcuts. You build it through honesty, through showing up. I hope you choose that, before it's too late. Dan, I stared at the letter until the ink blurred. Dad had seen it coming, all of it, and yet he still offered hope, still chose to believe Gregory might turn it around. Maybe that was naive. Or maybe that was just who my father was, a man who led with trust even when it broke him. That night I shared the letter with Vanessa. She cried full-body, unfiltered sobs that left her shaking. I don't deserve forgiveness, she choked out. Not from you, not from them. I handed her a fresh tissue and said the one thing I'd learned over the past year. It's not about deserving, it's about deciding who we want to become next. She looked up at me, eyes red but clear. And what if I still don't know who that is? Then keep walking toward the version of you that tells the truth, I said. Even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. She nodded. And in that moment, I knew the past would always knock. But we didn't have to open the door unless we were ready. And sometimes we could answer together. It was almost exactly 1 year since we lost them. April had rolled in like a soft sigh, and with it came the anniversary of the accident. The calendar marked it. Our hearts did too. Not with alarms or dread, but with something quieter, heavier, and strangely more manageable. Grief had become a familiar visitor. Not gone, but no longer overwhelming. It lived with us now. Watered the garden, sat at the dinner table, whispered in the corners of quiet afternoons. And yet something else lived with us too, Growth. That morning I walked outside to find Vanessa, kneeling in the soil, hands, dirty sleeves, rolled up hair pulled back into a messy ponytail. She was planting rose bushes, the same variety Mom loved, deep, fragrant reds that used to bloom under the kitchen window. Emma was beside her, placing tiny name markers next to each plant. Jackson followed with the watering can, accidentally soaking both their shoes. I stood there for a moment unseen, watching them, letting myself feel it. Not just sadness, not just the ache of what we'd lost, but something softer, the beauty of what was being rebuilt. Later that day, Vanessa and I sat on the porch again, where so many conversations had taken root. She pulled out a folder and handed it to me. I've been thinking, she said. Maybe it's time to make my own plan. Inside the folder was her new will. Modest, straightforward, but clear. She had named me guardian of the children in case something ever happened. She outlined college funding, life insurance details, and even a letter to the kids she wanted sealed until they were 18. Tears pricked my eyes. This is responsible, I said, quietly amazed. It's mature. Wow. It's overdue, she replied. But you know what? Writing it made me feel free. Like I don't have to keep pretending I'll live forever or that things can't fall apart again. They can. But I won't be unprepared this time. I reached for her hand. I'm proud of you. She smiled. I'm learning to be proud of me too. That evening we held a small dinner, just the four of us. We lit candles, cooked our parents' favorite meals, told stories we hadn't told since childhood. Vanessa recounted the time Dad tried to barbecue in a thunderstorm. I shared how Mom used to sing off-key during morning car rides just to make us laugh. Emma and Jackson giggled, listening like it was a bedtime tale. We didn't call it a memorial. We didn't need to, because in every moment the laughter, the food, the clinking of forks, and soft hum of shared memory, they were with us. Not in a spiritual, mystical sense, but in the legacy of what they'd built. This family, this house, this strength. After the kids went to bed, Vanessa stayed behind to help with the dishes. As we stood at the sink, she glanced over and said, "Do you think they know what? That we're okay now, that we're trying." I looked out the window toward the backyard where the roses were swaying in the breeze. "I think they knew the moment you picked up the shovel." She laughed softly. That was a terrible planting job. Mom would have scolded me. I smiled, but she would have hugged you after. The next morning I found something taped to the fridge, a note scribbled in Jackson's messy handwriting. Thank you, Aunt Rachel, for not giving up on Mom. I love you. P.S. Can I have pancakes tomorrow? I held the note to my chest and wept, not from pain, not from grief, but from the healing. From the reminder that sometimes the most powerful legacy isn't in land or bank accounts or last names. It's in the relationships we fight for, the boundaries we hold, and the hearts we slowly help mend. We were still flawed, still learning, still scarred, but we were a family again. And for the first time in a long, long time, that was enough. It's strange how even after everything, life doesn't just go back to normal. It becomes something new. Something stitched together from loss and choice repair and reinvention. In the months after the anniversary, our family didn't magically transform into some Hallmark-worthy unit. There were still moments of tension, days where Vanessa canceled plans last minute because work overwhelmed her, times when Jackson tested boundaries or Emma got moody and silent, moments I needed space. But here's the difference. We kept showing up. No one ran, no one played victim, no one pretended it didn't matter. We were learning how to stay. The Bennett Legacy Fund had grown faster than I imagined. A few local businesses pitched in donations after reading about our story in the regional newspaper. The community college partnered with us to provide mentorship to recipients. One of my former third-grade students became a finalist. When I told Vanessa, she smiled and said, "Look at you making Mom's casseroles and Dad's blueprints into something that helps strangers." It was the highest compliment I could have asked for. One Saturday, we had a community garden workday behind the school. Vanessa showed up early with the kids and 2 bags of mulch. No designer clothes, no sunglasses, just jeans, a hoodie, and the same hands that once signed fake inheritance waivers now planting seedlings alongside mine. During lunch, Jackson told one of the volunteers my mom used to be fancy. Now she's helpful. We both burst out laughing. He didn't mean it cruelly, he meant it truthfully. And honestly, that's what Vanessa had become helpful. To her kids, to herself, to me. That night, she and I sat in lawn chairs in the backyard wrapped in old blankets. The stars were clear. The house glowed softly behind us. "Have you thought about dating again?" she asked suddenly. I looked over at her eyebrows raised. "Wow, way to ease into that one." She shrugged. "I'm just saying. You deserve joy, Rachel. Not just responsibility, not just control. Something for you." It wasn't the first time someone had said that to me, but it was the first time I didn't bristle. I'd spent so long being the stable one, the backup plan, the one who fixed what others broke. Maybe I had forgotten that I was allowed to want something. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm still figuring out what joy even looks like." Vanessa smiled. "Then maybe the first step is letting someone else bring the dessert for once." I laughed, but I heard her, and I let the idea settle like a seed. A week later, I got a call from Mr. Whitaker. He was retiring at the end of the year and wanted to hand over the foundation's operations to someone else. I was going to recommend someone outside the family, he said, but, well, there's someone else who's expressed interest. Someone who's been doing the work quietly in the background. He didn't even need to say her name. "I think she's ready," he added, "but only if you are." I didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." When I told Vanessa, she froze. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "The scholarship fund isn't mine to guard forever. It's meant to grow. And I think you're the right person to help shape its next chapter." She didn't say anything for a moment. Her throat moved like she was swallowing a boulder. Then she whispered, "I'll earn this." "I know." She reached across the table and took my hand. "Thank you for giving me the chance." "I didn't give you the chance," I corrected gently. "You made the chance. I just didn't get in the way." That night, I walked out to the garden by myself. The roses had bloomed early this year, thick and heady with scent. I stood among them, closed my eyes, and listened to the wind rustling the leaves. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like a planter, someone preparing the soil for a future that wasn't just about surviving betrayal, but about nurturing something better, something honest, something real. A year and a half had passed since that horrible night, since the phone call that shattered my world, since the funeral that felt like a battlefield, since I stood across from my sister in court and watched every fragile bond between us teeter on the edge of ruin. But this morning was something different. This morning, Vanessa was standing next to me, smoothing the wrinkles out of her navy blazer, while Emma handed out programs to guests arriving at the school auditorium. The first official Bennett Legacy Scholarship ceremony was about to begin. And for once, everything didn't feel broken. It felt whole. The stage was decorated with potted plants from the garden hand-painted banners, and a framed photograph of Mom and Dad placed at the center of the podium, not large, not dramatic, just present. Just as they had always been. As people took their seats, Vanessa leaned toward me. "I had a dream last night," she whispered. "Mom was in it. She was teaching me how to make that awful chicken pot pie she always loved." I grinned. It wasn't awful, just aggressively creamy. Vanessa laughed. She said, "You always wanted filet mignon, but this was real food, real nourishment." I smiled. Sounds about right. Vanessa turned serious. I think I finally get what she meant. I squeezed her hand. Me too. The ceremony was simple. A few heartfelt speeches. 5 young students with trembling voices and wide eyes stepped up to receive their awards. Some of them came from homes not unlike ours, full of love, but not luxury. One of them, a girl named Kaya, choked up when she spoke. "My mom cleans houses. My dad drives a school bus. They've never been to college, but they always told me I'd be the first. This scholarship, it's not just money, it's belief. And that's something I didn't know I needed." She glanced at the framed photo on the podium. "I never met Daniel and Margaret Bennett, but I hope I make them proud." There wasn't a dry eye in the room, not even Vanessa's, especially not mine. After the ceremony, as guests mingled and students posed for pictures, Jackson ran up and grabbed my hand. "Aunt Rachel," he said excitedly, "can we plant something for Grandpa and Grandma today?" "Of course," I said. "What were you thinking?" "A lemon tree," he beamed. "Because lemons are sour, but they're awesome in cake." Vanessa burst out laughing behind him. "That might be the best metaphor for life I've ever heard," she said, wiping her eyes. So that afternoon, we all drove back to the house. We dug into the earth together, Vanessa, the kids, and me, and planted a small lemon tree in the corner of the yard, right near where Dad used to build birdhouses. No ceremony, no speeches, just hands in the soil and a quiet sense of completion. Afterward, we sat on the porch with lemonade, watching the sun fall behind the trees. Emma leaned her head on my shoulder. Jackson curled up beside Vanessa. "I miss them," he said softly. "We all do," I replied. "But they're still here," Emma added. "Right." I looked at the house, the garden, the tree, at Vanessa. "At the kids?" And I said yes, in every way that matters, they're here. Later that evening, after they left, I opened the final envelope I had kept sealed since the will reading. It was one more letter from Mom, one meant for me alone. "My sweet Rachel, we knew you would carry the weight. We knew you would choose the harder path, the quieter one. But we never wanted you to do it alone. We hoped in time your sister would remember who she was. And that you would remember who you are, not the fixer, not the peacekeeper, but the woman who knows when to say yes and when to say enough. Thank you for holding the line. Thank you for leaving the door open. Thank you for planting something that might take years to bloom. We trust your heart. We always have. Love you forever, Mom." I pressed the letter to my chest, and for the first time since they left this world, I let myself feel peace. Not the kind that comes from resolution, the kind that comes from becoming. So to anyone listening, if you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, if you've had to hold boundaries with shaking hands, if you've ever grieved someone who still walks among the living, know this: forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering and still choosing to water what matters, even when it hurts, even when it's slow, because families break. But sometimes if you're willing to get your hands dirty, they can grow back, one lemon tree at a time. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to rebuild trust with family or found healing after heartbreak, share your story. Someone might need to hear it. Subscribe for more stories of healing, heartbreak, and hope.